The car was still there. That is the part that the responding deputy, a man named Gerald Ochoa, who had been with the Sierra County Sheriff's Office for 11 years, said he could not stop thinking about in the weeks that followed. Not the unlocked door. Not the suitcase open on the bed with the clothes folded inside it, as if someone had been packing rather than unpacking. Not the 2 coffee cups on the small round table by the window, one with a faint ring of dried lipstick on the rim and one without, both still holding residue that the lab would later determine had been warm within the previous 4 to 6 hours. What Gerald kept returning to was the car. A 1984 Buick LeSabre in dark green, license plate registered to a Kenneth Maddox of Albuquerque, New Mexico, parked in space number 9, directly in front of room number 9 of the Crestline Motor Inn on Route 25 outside the town of Engel, New Mexico, on the morning of September 14, 1987. The car had not moved. The keys were on the dresser inside the room. And Kenneth and Carol Maddox, married 16 years, parents of 2 daughters, were nowhere on earth that anyone could find. There is a specific quality to a disappearance that happens in a place designed for passing through. A motel is, by its architecture and its purpose, a structure built around departure. You arrive, you sleep, you leave. The bed is not yours. The towels are not yours. The thin painting of a canyon bolted above the headboard is not yours. Everything about the design of the room is oriented toward the moment you will no longer be in it. When someone checks into a motel and then does not check out, they have violated the only contract the place was built to enforce. And when that person leaves behind their car, their clothes, their identification, their reading glasses folded on the nightstand beside a paperback novel with a gas station receipt used as a bookmark, what you are left with is not a mystery in the abstract sense. What you are left with is a room that knows something happened, that holds the shape of 2 people the way a mattress holds the shape of a body, and that offers nothing at all by way of explanation. This is the story of Room 9. And if you have been carrying it with you, if you have read the forum posts and the newspaper clippings and felt that none of them quite reached the center of it, you are right. None of them did. What follows is built from the original police files, the FBI supplemental case record, the personal testimony of the motel owner, and documents obtained through a public records request filed in 2019 that uncovered material that had not been discussed publicly before. It will not answer every question, but it will show you exactly where the answers stop, and why that stopping point is the most disturbing part of all. If stories like this are why you find yourself here at this hour, on this channel, you already know what Unresolved is about. We do not speculate without evidence. We do not perform shock. We follow the record until the record ends, and then we stand at that edge together and look at what is on the other side. Subscribe if you have not already. This community is built for the people who cannot let these things go, and there is room for one more. There is something that happens when you tell someone you cannot stop thinking about a case like this one. Most people nod politely and change the subject. They do not know what to do with a story that has no ending, and so they treat it like a story that has no point. If that has been your experience, I want you to leave a comment right now. Copy and paste this if it fits. I have been thinking about cases like this for years, and nobody around me understands why, because that comment tells the next person who watches this video that they are not alone, and in a case this unresolved, that is the closest thing to an answer most of us are going to get. The Crestline Motor Inn was built in 1961 by a man named Harold Crestline, which was not his actual surname. His name at birth was Harold Augusto Ferreira, the son of a Portuguese sheepherder who had come to New Mexico in 1923 and settled in the flatlands south of Truth or Consequences. Harold changed his name legally in 1958, 3 years before breaking ground on the motel, because Crestline was easier for people to remember. The motel sat on a strip of highway frontage on Route 25, approximately 14 miles south of Engler and 41 miles north of Truth or Consequences, in a stretch of high desert that offers almost nothing to the eye except the pale orange ground, the occasional dark ridge of mountains to the west, and the specific kind of sky that exists only in that part of the country, so blue it seems almost structural. Harold built 12 rooms in a single-story L-shaped configuration, each room with a door facing the parking lot and a small window on the side facing either the highway or the empty desert behind the building. He painted everything a shade of cream that the desert sun turned to the color of old bone within 2 years, and he ran the place himself until 1974, when a mild stroke made the daily operations difficult. By 1987, the manager of record was a woman named Sylvia Reyes, 44 years old, who had been running the operations for 3 years and who lived in a small house Harold had built behind the property. Sylvia Reyes was the last person who could confirm, with certainty, that Kenneth and Carol Maddox were alive and present at the Crestline. She saw them at approximately 9:15 on the evening of September 13, 1987, when Kenneth came to the office to ask whether there was a restaurant within driving distance still serving dinner. Sylvia told him that the nearest option was the Desert Rose Cafe in Engel, about 14 miles north, closing at 10. Kenneth thanked her. She watched him walk back to room 9. She did not see him again. The following morning, a Sunday, she knocked on the door of room 9 at 11:30, because checkout was at 11 and the room had not been vacated. There was no answer. She tried the handle and found it unlocked. She pushed the door open and stood in the doorway for a moment before going inside. What she saw is documented in her original statement to the Sierra County Sheriff's Office, case number SC 19870914MW, taken that afternoon by Deputy Gerald Ochoa. The lights were off. The curtains were drawn. The room smelled like the synthetic floral of the bedspread detergent and the faint mineral smell of desert motel ventilation. But underneath that was something else she described as almost like standing water, though there was no moisture anywhere she could see. The bed had been slept in by 2 people. Both pillows were indented. The sheets were pulled back on both sides, as if 2 people had gotten up at approximately the same time. Kenneth's wallet was on the dresser beside the car keys. Carol's purse was on the small chair in the corner, and when Sylvia opened it at the request of Deputy Ochoa, it contained Carol's driver's license, her credit cards, $62 in cash, a tube of lipstick, a folded piece of notepaper with her sister's phone number in Farmington, and nothing that explained why Carol had left the room without it. The suitcase was the detail that most people who have followed this case return to. It was a medium-sized hard-shell suitcase in burgundy, sitting open on the luggage rack beside the closet. The contents were folded with the care of someone packing rather than someone who had simply left things inside for convenience. 3 pairs of slacks, 2 of them Kenneth's and 1 Carol's, were folded and stacked on one side. 2 of Carol's blouses were folded beside them. A dop kit containing Kenneth's toiletries was zipped and placed on top. The deliberate arrangement suggested the couple had been preparing to check out, that they had packed before going somewhere and had not returned. But the clothing they had been wearing when Sylvia saw them the previous evening, 2 pairs of jeans, 2 pairs of shoes, Kenneth's flannel shirt, Carol's light jacket, was not in the suitcase. It was not in the closet. It was not in the bathroom. Whatever Kenneth and Carol had been wearing at 9:15 on the night of September 13th, they were wearing it when they left. They had simply not taken anything else. The FBI was brought in on September 19th under the standard protocol for multi-state missing persons cases, given that Kenneth and Carol were residents of Bernalillo County and had disappeared in Sierra County. The case was assigned to Special Agent Patricia Dunmore of the Albuquerque Field Office, who had handled missing persons cases for 7 years, and who would later describe the Maddox file as unlike any other case she worked in her career. Agent Dunmore's initial canvassing produced no witnesses who had seen Kenneth or Carol after Sylvia's contact at 9:15. The Desert Rose Cafe in Engel confirmed that no couple matching their description had come in that night. They had either changed their minds about dinner or gone somewhere else, and there was no evidence of anywhere else within a reasonable radius. The canvass expanded outward over 2 weeks. Every gas station, diner, bar and convenience store within 40 miles was visited. No one remembered seeing them. The stretch of Route 25 in that area had no traffic cameras in 1987, and the one witness who might have noticed movement, a long-haul trucker named Dale Finch, who regularly ran that corridor, remembered seeing a dark-colored car parked at the Crestline with its lights on at around 10 at night, but could not confirm the make or the direction it was facing. He had not slowed down because there was nothing unusual about a car parked at a motel. One of the elements of the case that receives almost no attention in secondary accounts is the phone. Room 9 had a beige rotary telephone mounted on the wall beside the bed, connected to a single line running through the office. Sylvia kept a log of all outgoing calls for billing purposes. The log for September 13th shows 2 outgoing calls from Room 9. The first was placed at 6:47 in the evening and lasted 3 minutes and 12 seconds. The number called was a residential line in Albuquerque belonging to the Maddox family home, where the couple's 2 daughters were staying with Kenneth's mother. The 14-year-old daughter told investigators that her father had called to say they had arrived safely and would call again in the morning. He did not call in the morning. The second outgoing call from Room 9 was placed at 9:51 in the evening, approximately 36 minutes after Kenneth's conversation with Sylvia about the restaurant. The call lasted 44 seconds. The number called was not a residential number. It was not a business number. It was a New Mexico number, area code 505, that appeared in no directory and was registered to no account with any telephone carrier operating in the state. When agents attempted to call the number back, the line rang 17 times with no answer. When they attempted to trace the physical location of the line, the carrier records showed only that it had been assigned from a pool of unallocated numbers in 1981 and had never been formally connected to a subscriber. Who Kenneth called at 9:51, 44 seconds before the call disconnected, has never been determined. Kenneth Roy Maddox was 43 years old. He had worked for the same insurance company in Albuquerque for 19 years, had never been in significant legal trouble, and was described by colleagues and family as methodical and responsible, with no history of erratic behavior. His financial records, subpoenaed by the FBI on September 22nd, showed a man of modest and stable means, a mortgage on a 3-bedroom house in northeast Albuquerque, 2 car payments, a savings account with $11,000 in it, no unusual withdrawals in the months preceding the trip. There was nothing in the financial record suggesting planning for departure. Carol Ann Maddox, 41 years old, worked part-time as a bookkeeper for a dental practice and had arranged coverage for the days she would be absent, leaving her files in good order. Her sister in Farmington told investigators that Carol had seemed entirely normal in their last phone call 3 days before the trip, had talked about the drive and the weather, and mentioned she was looking forward to a few days away from the city. The sister had not heard from Carol since. She said Carol was not the type to disappear. She said it the way people say things they are afraid are not true, simply because they need them to be true. The trip had a stated purpose. Kenneth and Carol were driving to Las Cruces to visit a property a relative had listed for sale, an undeveloped parcel of land Kenneth had expressed vague interest in. The visit was not urgent, and Kenneth had made no formal appointment. It was the kind of low-stakes errand that serves as a frame for a road trip more than an actual destination. They planned to spend one night on the way south, visit the property on the 14th, and drive home after one more night. The Crestline was a logical stopping point on Route 25. There was nothing unusual about the choice. There was nothing unusual, as far as anyone could determine, about anything Kenneth and Carol had done from the moment they left Albuquerque until the moment Sylvia knocked on the door of room 9 and found it empty. If this case is reaching you right now, if you have been listening and feeling the particular weight of a story that refuses to close, this is the moment to hit the like button. Not as a formality, but because the algorithm uses that signal to put this kind of content in front of people who need it, people looking for a channel that treats these cases with the seriousness they deserve. If you have not subscribed, do it now. There are more cases like this one, and some of them are even harder to put down. The investigation was formally classified as an active missing persons case by the FBI in October 1987 and remained open under that classification for 11 years before being moved to inactive status in 1998. The case number is FBI ABQ 1987 MP0914MDX, listed in the Bureau's Public Case Index as open, inactive, no determination. After 11 years of active investigation and more than 2 decades of the case remaining in the system, no one has determined what happened to Kenneth and Carol Maddox. Not what happened to their bodies, assuming they are dead. Not where they went, assuming they left. Not why they left, assuming they chose to. Not who Kenneth spoke to for 44 seconds at 9:51 on the evening of September 13th. Harold Crestline, born Harold Ferreira, died in January 1992 at the age of 78. In the last months of his life, he gave a series of informal recorded conversations to a local historian named Margaret Pringle, who was compiling a history of Route 25 corridor businesses for the Sierra County Historical Preservation Society. In the 5th recording, dated October 1991, Harold speaks at length about the Maddox case, which he describes as something he thought about every day. He says that after the FBI investigation concluded and the case faded from local news, he began paying closer attention to things he had previously not noticed. He began keeping a log of every guest who stayed specifically in room 9. Not all rooms, only room 9. He does not explain in the recording what prompted him to single out that room, only that it felt correct to do so. Harold's room 9 log, a spiral-bound notebook found among his personal effects and donated to the Historical Society archive, covers January 1988 to December 1991. It contains entries for 91 separate guests or guest parties. The entries are brief: a date, a name, or the word couple or family, a state of origin based on the vehicle plate, and a column Harold headed simply departed. In 90 of the 91 entries, the departed column contains a date and a time. In one entry, dated June 4th through June 5th, 1989, the name recorded is a man listed only as Harlan, the state of origin is listed as Texas, and the departed column is blank. There is no explanation in the log for the blank, no asterisk, no notation, no follow-up entry. Harold simply moved on to the next entry. The blankness of that one entry sits in the middle of the notebook, the way a gap in memory sits in the middle of a sentence you are trying to finish. Not quite visible if you are reading quickly, impossible to ignore if you are reading with care. When Margaret Pringle noticed the blank entry, she contacted Sylvia Reyes and asked whether she recalled a lone male guest from Texas in early June 1989. Sylvia said she did not. She said she would remember something like that, because the Maddox case had made her acutely aware of departures in a way she had never been before. After September 1987, she had made it her practice to watch for every car leaving the property and to note the time in her own informal record. She was certain no one had stayed in room 9 in June 1989 without leaving. She would have noticed. She would have called the sheriff immediately. And yet Harold's log contained the blank, and Harold had been a careful and methodical man. Margaret verified this by cross-referencing his business ledgers from the same period and finding not a single accounting discrepancy across 4 years of financial record-keeping. Agent Dunmore returned to the Crestline twice after the initial investigation, once in November 1988 for a routine follow-up, and once in March 1991 for what the record describes as a re-interview of the primary witness. The notes from the 1991 visit are 14 pages, considerably longer than would be expected for a routine re-interview in a case that had generated no new leads in 3.5 years. During the 1991 visit, Sylvia disclosed something she had not mentioned in any previous interview, something she describes as not coming to mind until she was lying in bed one night in early 1989, 16 months after the disappearance. What Sylvia said she remembered was a sound, not a dramatic sound, a door. She remembered hearing the door to room 9 open and close at some point in the night of September 13th. She could not give a precise time. She said it was after midnight because she had already been asleep and the sound had woken her briefly. She heard the door open, she heard it close, and then she heard nothing else. No car engine, no voices, no footsteps. Just the door opening and closing in the specific way that the Crestline's metal-framed doors operated, the slight resistance of the pneumatic hinge, and then the solid click of the latch catching. She had not reported this at the time because she had not remembered it at the time. The memory had surfaced without warning while she was lying in the dark looking at the ceiling. And what disturbed her when it surfaced was not the sound itself, but the absence of what should have followed it. A motel door that opens in the middle of the night is followed by something. By an engine, by voices, by footsteps, by a second door, by any of the 1,000 small sounds that compose the texture of a place people are passing through. There had been nothing, just the door, and then the night, undisturbed, as if whoever opened and closed it had stepped out of the room and into nothing at all. Agent Dunmore's notes from the 1991 interview contain a section that has been partially redacted in the FOIA release, approximately 2 paragraphs in which the redaction codes indicate the withheld material pertains to ongoing investigative methodology. What is visible before and after the redaction suggests Dunmore had been pursuing a line of inquiry related to the phone call at 9:51, specifically the possibility that the unidentified number had connections to other missing persons cases in the Route 25 corridor. The visible portions of the notes mention a case number from 1983 and a case number from 1991 without identifying the cases by name or location, and they contain a notation that reads cross-reference corridor pattern, flagged for regional review. Whether any regional review was conducted and what it found is not visible in the available records. The referenced case numbers do not appear in the public FBI case index under any search that has been attempted. They may have been reclassified. They may be entirely unrelated to the Maddox disappearance, or they may be exactly what they appear to be, which is evidence that Dunmore had begun to suspect that what happened in room 9 was not a singular event. The most significant piece of secondary documentation to emerge in the years since the initial investigation is a memoir fragment, 8 handwritten pages, found in the belongings of a man named Thomas Alcott, who died in Albuquerque in 2016 at the age of 81. Thomas had worked as a telephone company field engineer in New Mexico from 1968 until his retirement in 1998. His family found the 8 pages in a sealed envelope in a fireproof lockbox along with his will. The envelope was labeled with a date, September 1989, and the words for the record. Thomas's daughter, uncertain what to do with the pages and having read enough to understand their relevance, contacted researcher James Okafor in 2017, and Okafor published a detailed account in an update to his original investigation into the Maddox case. Thomas Alcott wrote that he had been part of a team assigned in late 1987 to trace the unidentified number that Kenneth had called on the night of September 13th. He confirms that the number was registered to no subscriber and appeared in no directory, and that the physical trace of the line led to a junction box outside Engel that the team found locked with a padlock that did not match the standard company hardware used for those installations. The team supervisor decided not to cut the lock and instead reported the discrepancy to the company's facilities management division. 2 weeks later, Thomas drove past the junction box on an unrelated service call and found it standing open, the padlock removed, the interior entirely empty. No wiring, no equipment, nothing that would explain how any signal had ever been routed through it. He filed a supplemental report with the facilities division and never received any response. He writes the 8 pages. He explains in the first paragraph, because he is 73 years old and has been diagnosed with a condition that makes the near future uncertain, and there are things that should be in the record that are not in the record, and he is old enough to no longer care what people think about him for saying them. What Thomas Alcott cannot explain is who installed the equipment in the junction box, who removed it after the investigation, and what it was being used for. He only knows that a telephone line registered to no one received a call from room 9 at 9:51 on the night of September 13th, 1987, and that the physical infrastructure making that call possible was in place before the call and gone within 2 weeks after it. He only knows that Kenneth Maddox made that call, and that 44 seconds later the call ended, and that sometime after midnight the door to room 9 opened and closed without anything following it, and that in the morning the room was empty of people and full of everything people leave behind when they intend to return. There is a last detail from Sylvia Reyes's 2013 interview with Okafor, mentioned in passing near the very end, that Okafor initially overlooked and returned to only when rereading the transcript for his 2017 update. When Sylvia cleaned room 9 after the FBI finished, she turned the percolator on to make sure it was working properly. She poured a cup and set it on the small table by the window, which was her habit in every room, a cup of coffee waiting as a kind of readiness signal. She then went to finish the rest of the room and came back a few minutes later to clear the cup. When she picked it up, the coffee was cold. Not room temperature. Cold, she says. Cold enough that she checked the percolator, which was working correctly, which was producing heat. She assumed she had misremembered how long she had been in the other part of the room. She poured the cold coffee out, poured a fresh cup, and left. She did not think about it again for years. If you have stayed with this until now, if you have been sitting in the particular discomfort that comes from following a record to its end and finding that the end is just another opening, you already understand why this case stays with people. It is not the most dramatic disappearance in the files. It is not accompanied by the kind of physical evidence that makes investigators confident something catastrophic occurred, because there is almost no physical evidence at all. What makes the Maddox case different is the precision of the ordinary around it. 2 people in their 40s, married 16 years, driving through New Mexico on a trip they did not need to take, staying in a room they booked for one night, drinking coffee they brewed themselves in a percolator that was still on in the morning, a door that opened and closed after midnight with nothing following it, a phone call 44 seconds long to a number that went nowhere, a suitcase packed with care, a car that did not move, 2 daughters who waited by the phone in Albuquerque and heard nothing, who are now in their 50s, who are still listed as next of kin on a federal case file that has been inactive for more than 25 years. The coffee in room 9 was cold when it should have been warm. That is the smallest detail in the case, and somehow the one that sits heaviest, the one that implies a gap between what happened and what was possible. Kenneth Maddox brewed that coffee before something happened. Carol drank it with him. The percolator was still on, and somewhere between the warmth of that cup and the cold of the next one, in the space of a night that left no trace, two people stepped through a door and into whatever comes after the record stops. The record stops at 9:51. After that, there is only the desert and the road and a room that has been waiting, with the particular patience of places that have already gotten what they came for someone to finally ask the right question. The question is not what happened to Kenneth and Carol Maddox. Anyone who has followed this to its end already knows that question has no answer in the documents we have. The question is why Room 9? Why a couple from Albuquerque on a low-stakes road trip with no enemies and no secrets anyone has been able to find? Why 44 seconds? Why a junction box with equipment that was gone before anyone official thought to look for it? Why the cold coffee? And the question, finally and most uncomfortably, is what you do with the fact that you have been thinking about this case for longer than you want to admit, and that it keeps returning to you at night in the particular quiet after the last sound of the house settles, in the same way that a door might open and close in the dark with nothing following it. Just the click of the latch. And then the night. And then nothing else at all. If this case is one you will carry with you, subscribe to Unresolved so you never have to carry these things alone. We publish every week, and every case we cover is investigated with the same patience and the same respect for the record that this one deserves. Next week, we begin a case that starts with a name removed from a military personnel file in 1971, and we will follow that removal until we find what it was hiding, or until we find that what it was hiding was designed never to be found. Either way, we will go the whole distance. We always do.